Sean Hannity is next from New York. Have a great night.
Thanks, Tucker, and good luck to Shannon and Laura tonight. We'll have more of that in a little while. You do not want to miss a minute of tonight's show. Welcome to Hannity. This is a Fox News Alert. This may be one of the most important monologues I will ever give on this show. Tonight we have a major crisis in this country. Does America have equal justice under the law? It appears tonight the answer is no. Because from everything we now know, there's one justice system for the Clintons, the left, liberals, and all their cronies, and another one for everyone else in America. And tonight on this show, with the result of the indictment of Paul Manafort and his associate, we will show you right here how there is zero evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, zero evidence of campaign collusion. And in spite of all of that, the media has been lying to you all day and all weekend long. What we have is incontrovertible evidence. We will lay it all out tonight. That Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and others sold out America's national security interests, yet only now in the last 2 weeks are we beginning the process of investigating. We have evidence, including an FBI informant, documents, emails, tapes, all showing that in 2009, our government, including then Attorney General Eric Holder, the FBI director at the time, Robert Mueller, and then District Attorney Rod Rosenstein, they all knew that Russia and Vladimir Putin were trying to corner the uranium market right here in America. There's also a strong belief that President Barack Obama knew all about Putin and his crimes in this country, as he probably saw it in his presidential daily briefing. This is news, information, and truth I promise you can't get anywhere else in the media. And that is tonight's ever-important breaking news opening monologue. All right, let's start at the beginning. It was announced today that Paul Manafort, well, something that was pretty much expected after his home was raided by the FBI, was indicted today. It's a 31-page indictment. It discussed charges, and we'll put it up on the side of the screen for you. Money laundering, failing to register as a foreign agent, tax crimes. But interestingly, because this is the special counsel that was supposed to investigate Trump-Russia collusion, this indictment has nothing, let me repeat, nothing to do with Trump-Russia collusion. Zip, zero, nada. The most spectacular finding within the Manafort indictment is this. In regards to the financial issues, the last year of any financial transaction was 2014. The years they were looking at was between 2008 and 2014. And as far as we know, Trump wasn't even thinking of running for president in 2014. So in other words, nothing of the Paul Manafort indictment had anything to do with the Trump campaign or Donald Trump. Is this all Mueller has? Because if it is, it's pathetic. Another day, another example, after a year of speculation, no evidence of any collusion between President Trump and Russia. Now, you've heard the saying, we've all heard it, you can indict a ham sandwich. Well, grand juries are convened. Guess what? In case you don't know, only the prosecution gets to present evidence. The defense gets zero opportunity whatsoever to present their case. The legal standard before a grand jury is much lower. They must be convinced probable cause. Okay, but in a court of law, the criminal standard is a jury of your peers beyond a reasonable doubt, a massive distinction. And it's important to point out that this grand jury was impaneled in Washington, D.C. Let's see, one of the most liberal cities in America, where over 90% of the people there voted for Hillary Clinton. Mr. Mueller, do you think that's fair? Now, here's what Paul Manafort's attorney said earlier today. For the first time, they speak out. Listen.
That President Donald Trump was correct. There is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government. Today, you see an indictment brought by an Office of Special Counsel that is using a very novel theory to prosecute Mr. Manafort regarding a FARA filing. The United States government has only used that offense 6 times since 1966 and only resulted in 1 conviction.
6 times since 1966, 1 conviction. So like every American, Paul Manafort, he deserves what we all deserve, the presumption of innocence. However, he is being tried tonight and convicted in the court of public opinion by what is an abusively biased, Trump-hating media. Also, as part of the news that came out today, George Papadopoulos, he admitted, okay, he lied to the FBI. I think he's 29 years old. Now, I knew everybody in the Trump campaign. I never heard about Papadopoulos until today. And I think I knew everybody. Now, the White House says he was a volunteer, and it seems that Papadopoulos, on his own, was trying to create an anti-Clinton Russian dossier, like the Fusion GPS, Hillary DNC, President Obama-funded dossier, and he wasn't successful. So now that we have no Trump collusion, here's what we do have tonight. This is what the media will ignore. This is what matters. These are the facts. This is where the evidence comes in. What did President Clinton or President Clinton wannabe, President Obama, and key members of the administration, what did they know about the Uranium One scandal? Now, we're learning about how the Obama administration officials, they knew in 2009 that Vladimir Putin was using bribes, extortion, kickbacks, money laundering, and racketeering all within this country, spies within this country. Nothing was done to stop it. We have incontrovertible evidence that all involved tried to cover this up. They put a gag order on the one FBI informant that knew everything to prevent the truth from getting out. Now it's getting out. We have incontrovertible evidence that the Clintons benefited in a massive, huge financial way because of this corrupt Uranium One deal. We know Bill Clinton doubled his speaking fees in Moscow while giving a speech to a bank that, interestingly enough, had a financial interest in Uranium One. Bill Clinton also tried to get State Department permission, his wife's State Department, to meet with Russian nuclear officials during the time of the Uranium One deal, and he eventually ended up sitting down with Vladimir Putin himself. And as the author, Peter Schweitzer, writes about in his best-selling book, Clinton Cash, the Clinton Foundation got $145 million in kickbacks from people that directly benefited from that deal. We have incontrovertible evidence that Putin and his spies and his thugs were actually successful because he eventually got 20% of America's uranium, the foundational material for nuclear weapons. This is beyond insanity and inexcusable. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, the Obama administration allowed your national security to be compromised in what is an unprecedented way, and few in the media will touch this story. Major crimes were committed. They knew about it. They did nothing before the deal. Now, here's a simple question. We have to ask it. Why on earth would President Obama or Hillary or Eric Holder ever sign off on giving Russia, a known enemy, Putin, a bad actor, 20% control of our uranium? What did America get? What did Obama get from this Uranium One deal? It never made sense. Now, we also have incontrovertible evidence that the Clinton campaign and the DNC, they paid Fusion GPS over $9 million, although nobody knows anything, and they hired a former British intelligence agent who then used current and former Russian government sources to produce this phony, fake, salacious news dossier that was full of lies, disinformation, and propaganda against Donald Trump. In other words, Clinton and the DNC funded the money to spread Russian lies and influence the election. They did it all because it is the very thing they're now accusing President Trump and his campaign of doing. They did it themselves. And we just found out this weekend, this new report from the Federalist, the headline: Obama's campaign paid $972,000 to the law firm that secretly paid Fusion GPS in 2016. Well, the same firm that the Clinton campaign, the DNC, used to pay Fusion GPS to create the fake news propaganda anti-Trump dossier that they then regurgitated all over TV. Now, we also have Robert Mueller and his band of big Democratic donors that work for him now, supposedly investigating Trump-Russia collusion. And as I predicted right here on this show, there is still no evidence this ever happened. None. Now, former, current, and top Democrats have all said the same thing. Smoke, but no fire. Smoke, but no fire. Watch this.
Have you seen anything that suggests any collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign?
Well, there's an awful lot of smoke there, let's put it that way. People that might have said they were involved, to what extent they were involved, to what extent the president might have known about these people or whatever. There's nothing there from that standpoint that we have seen directly linking our president to any of that.
The last time we spoke, Senator, I asked you if you had actually seen evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and you said to me, and I'm quoting you now, you said, not at this time. Has anything changed since we spoke last?
Well, no, it hasn't.
I know we need to go soon, but just to be clear, there has been no actual evidence yet.
No, it has not been.
Okay. I just want
no, it has not.
At the time I left, I did not see any smoking gun certitude evidence of collusion.
Is there any evidence of collusion that you have seen yet? Is there?
Listen, there is a lot of smoke. We have no smoking gun at this point.
No smoking gun. Tonight, still, no smoking gun. And your lying media in this country would have all of you believe the indictment of Paul Manafort and his associate, Rick Gates, has everything to do with Trump-Russia collusion. It has nothing to do with it. Here's the truth. Nothing. Now, none of that is related to President Trump. None of it, zero, is related to his campaign. And the vast majority of these allegations all happened before Paul Manafort ever worked for the Trump campaign. And also tonight, the issue of Robert Mueller attempting to change the narrative to distract from the real Russia collusion and massive cover-ups. Don't think this is a coincidence. Last week, right here on this program, we had stunning revelation after revelation, day after day, about Hillary Clinton, Uranium One, the fake news dossier, and that special counsel Mueller is clearly complicit in the Uranium One scandal. Remember, he was the FBI director, the FBI informant, had all the evidence of bribes and kickbacks and money laundering, and he did nothing. So now they need to change the narrative after a very bad week and distract the country from their evidence and their involvement in possible collusion. And by the way, Mr. Mueller, who leaked the indictments to fake news CNN? Was it you? Now, I can confirm exclusively here tonight on Hannity, Friday night, all day Saturday, Manafort's team did not know this was coming. So somebody disclosed this information. That is a crime, Mr. Mueller. You should know this. And by the way, anybody from the grand jury, it's a simple crime. Who did it? Did anyone, Mr. Mueller, in your office do it? Now, while liberals in the media are hysterical, absolutely beside themselves with giddiness, thinking this is the big smoking gun about Paul Manafort, there's another major shoe dropping in these major Democratic scandals. Now, we first reported on Tony Podesta over a week ago on October the 24th. He's the brother of Clinton's former campaign manager, John Podesta. And according to Politico, Tony Podesta is now stepping down from his lobbying group because he is being investigated by the special counsel. And as we have now been reporting, the probe into Tony Podesta and his lobbying group came about after Mueller started looking into Manafort's finances. NBC News even pointed out that Podesta's group worked with Manafort on a public relations campaign called European Center for a Modern Ukraine. And NBC News even adds that Mueller could be looking into whether Podesta and his company violated what's known as FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And Politico is reporting that both Tony and, John Podesta, Hillary's campaign manager, and even Sid Vicious Blumenthal, they were all conveniently together this weekend at Hillary Clinton's birthday party in Washington. Wonder what everybody talked about. And after new revelations that the Clinton campaign and the DNC paid almost $10 million to help spread Russia anti-Trump lies and propaganda, well, now even Senator Susan Collins is saying that John Podesta and disgraced former DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz, they need to retestify before Congress about the phony Clinton Russian lying dossier that was meant to influence the American people on the eve of an election. Watch this.
They absolutely need to be recalled. It's difficult to imagine that a campaign chairman, that the head of the DNC would not know of an expenditure of this magnitude and significance, but perhaps there's something more going on here. But certainly it's worth additional questioning of those two witnesses.
You need to know there is no chance that over $10 million goes out the door to pay for this lying dossier. And nobody knows about it. If you listen to the Clinton people, the DNC people, I don't know. Nobody knows. $10 million out the door. And guess what? They're all lying because they all use the same attorney and the same law firm. Take a look how Congressman and former prosecutor Trey Gowdy is now properly interpreting what Clinton and the DNC and now Obama did in paying for this dossier. This is interesting.
I'm not an election law expert, Chris, but the good news is you don't have to be to understand the absurdity of believing that you can launder all of your campaign money by just hiring a law firm. I mean, imagine if you and I were running for Congress and we just hired a law firm and said, hey, you go do all the oppo, you go buy all the television, you go buy all the bumper stickers, you go hire all the experts, and we're going to launder all of this through a law firm. I can't think of anything that defeats the purpose of transparency laws more than that.
This is not hyperbole. I am not overstating the case. We are at a major crisis point in America tonight. Do we have equal justice under the law in this country today? If you or I, if anybody in this room with me now or watching TV with you, if we ever did anything close to what the Clintons, the DNC, and others did, we would be rotting in a jail cell tonight, hoping our friends would send us a cake that had a file. The only difference between Trump-Russia collusion is that we have the evidence, and after a year of black helicopter conspiracy theories, they have none. And just like we have the evidence when it comes to Clinton and her email server scandal, why hasn't she been charged? Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, who will join us tonight, has helped us put together a list of all the laws broken in all of these scandals. Take a look at the side of your screen. These are the laws that were potentially broken, all by the Clinton campaign and the DNC in the fake news dossier scandal. Of course, they use Russian sources bought and paid for by Hillary, the DNC, and Obama to smear Trump and influence the election with Russian lies. Then there's the massive Uranium One scandal that Congress rightly is now investigating. We do need a special prosecutor. Finally, you have, look right there, federal statutes involving crimes like bribery and mail fraud and wire fraud and racketeering. And as we've been saying, all of this is beyond serious. It compromised our national security, and people should be put behind bars. There's also the Clinton email server scandal. I haven't forgotten. Truth matters. The law matters. Equal justice matters. Remember, she had secret, top secret, special access program, classified information on a server stored in the bathroom of a mom and pop shop. Her team also deleted over 33,000 subpoenaed emails using bleach bit and acid wash, smashing Blackberries and other devices with a hammer, removing the SIM cards before giving the mobile devices to the FBI. That's called obstruction of justice. That's a felony. And just to recap, since it's so vitally important, probably the biggest scandal of all is Bill and Hillary Clinton selling out America's national security to Putin and the Russians. And guess what? The FBI had the information before they made the deal. And the FBI director's name at that time was Robert Mueller. And Eric Holder was the attorney general at the time who oversaw the FBI. They had to know. And yet a year later, when even though they had evidence of bribery and collusion and money laundering and all these crimes, they ignored the evidence, and Eric Holder and Clinton signed off on the single, beyond the Iranian deal, dumbest national security decision ever. Rod Rosenstein, he oversaw the investigation. Remember, he's the guy that appointed Mueller on a local level while he was serving as a U.S. attorney for Maryland. He appointed Mueller to be the special counsel here. This is beyond incestuous. What about investigating their roles in Russia? Hillary Clinton's State Department, Eric Holder, signed off on the deal a year later, knowing that Putin's, what his intentions were to corner the uranium market. Bill Clinton makes a fortune, doubles his speaking fees, paid with a check from a bank that has a financial interest in Uranium One. He tried to get his wife meetings with Russian nuclear officials for him, but he met with Putin instead. That was in 2009. Then in 2010, Putin gets everything he wants in spite of all the evidence of his spies, his agents committing crimes in this country. And as we mentioned earlier, between Fusion GPS, between Uranium One, we have evidence of real Russian collusion. America tonight is at a crisis point. Will we have equal justice under the law, or will America just be a banana republic, corrupt at its core? That is what is at stake tonight. And that is what the corrupt media will never tell you, because the media is part of the corruption that is the sewer, that is the swamp, that is Washington, D.C. So tonight, America has a choice. We can have equal justice for everyone, or we can live in a country where if you have the right politics, you stand for the right left-wing positions, you can sell out your country and you can get away with it. Guess what? This program is dedicated to the truth. We will get to the bottom of all of this. Joining us now, he is the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. He's also one of the president's attorneys, exclusive tonight, Jay Sekulow. Let me start with a simple question, your take on all of this.
Well, on the, it's not surprising that there was an indictment that came down in Paul Manafort's situation, because that had been anticipated for a number of weeks. I mean, it had been speculated in the press. You had the no-knock search of his house, which raises a whole host of constitutional issues. And then when you look at the context of the indictment and you read through it, you realize that the basis upon which the indictment is rendered has nothing to do with the campaign or campaign activities of the president, but rather involves business transactions and activities that Paul Manafort was allegedly engaged in his business going back to 2006. So you have to look at these issues and on the basis of the documents that have been produced. And the document that's been produced right now is the indictment. And as I said, that indictment focuses in on the business activities and corporate activities of Paul Manafort's and not focus in on at all with regard to the campaign or campaign activities of the president. So I think that's a big takeaway from this when you look at the nature and the scope of the fact that it's been known for a number of weeks that Paul Manafort was a principal target of this. So again, not surprising. Surprising that there was a leak of a sealed indictment, however, or at least that's what CNN was reporting. Well, I don't know. I mean, this idea that an indictment would be that sealed, number one, would be leaked is a crime in and of itself. And, I don't know who was responsible for leaking it. I just know that it was reported. And as you reported, that I guess Paul Manafort's lawyers did not know until late yesterday, evidently, that they were the subject of that indictment. So, again, that raises another issue. And why in the world would there be a leak of an indictment, especially an indictment that's sealed? I mean, why do you seal an indictment? They were concerned about flight risk. There's a list in the Department of Justice manual. Yeah.
All right. So the media's going obsessed. I knew everybody in the Trump campaign. You know how active I was in the campaign, invested I was, and the media was ready to say Hannity's wrong and his career is over. It didn't happen. My obituary was written. Papadopoulos. I never heard of him. I'm told he's a volunteer. He's 29 years old. Yeah. Maybe worked for Mueller from July on. I never heard of the guy until today. Thoughts?
Yeah. So here's what I know. I don't know him either. I do know this, that based on the reports that I've seen, that he was part of a committee, a foreign affairs committee, that are typical with this. Was during the campaign season. These campaigns have a lot of committees, and there's a lot of people on these committees. They generally do advisory work, but they're not paid staffers. It's not a organized structure as you would think of for instance, within the State Department. This was a volunteer, and what he did or did not do is also interesting in the document, because what did he get charged for? Did he get charged for contacting some professor that was supposedly Russian? That's at least the allegation in the documents, his plea agreement that he signed. No, what he got charged with was lying to a federal agent when asked a question about the timing of those meetings and whether he was a member of this committee.
That suggested that he said no, and nobody knew who the guy was.
Yeah, but again, this is the FBI didn't, or the special counsel didn't indict here for his conversation that he had with purportedly someone that had some Russia affiliation, this professor. But they indicted him for what, or plead him for what? That was lying under oath to an agent.
All right. Jay,
which is 18 U.S.C. 1001. All right, thanks, Sean.
All right, Jay, appreciate it. Stay with us this hour. Literally, we have so much ground to cover. It's changing by the minute. We have a powerful lineup. Newt Gingrich next, Sebastian Gorka, Greg Jarrett, all here. And during this commercial break, go to my Twitter page, @SeanHannity. We want to hear from you. Do you think equal justice under the law is at risk? Tell us what you think. Welcome back to Hannity, here now with reaction to our opening monologue. All this breaking news out of Washington. The author of the best-selling book, Vengeance, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. The most amazing thing here is this is supposed to be a special counsel on Trump-Russia collusion. The big indictment today, well, announced and leaked Friday, but announced today, Paul Manafort. Mr. Speaker, 31 pages, no Trump, Russia collusion, zero. But all these other issues I am talking about, the Fusion GPS dossier, the Uranium One deal, We have a boatload of evidence. What's your take?
Well, first of all, the United States Congress should open an investigation to protect the rights of Americans. You have an out-of-control prosecutor who was supposed to be looking into Russian collusion, who, think about this, Paul Manafort voluntarily showed up today, walked in, turned himself over, is not a threat to the public, was not a threat to flee. Yet, this summer, the Justice Department broke into his house at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Guns blazing.
Caught he and his wife in their pajamas.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you have to say to yourself, this is the most grotesque abuse. And then you look at, as you pointed out earlier, a 29-year-old who is now pled guilty to what? To having said the wrong thing to the FBI, having factually been wrong. He clearly lied. Would you like to go back and look at the Clinton staff, John Podesta? Notice that even the Susan Collins tonight, Senator Collins, said he's going to have to come back and testify, implying, I think, they did not tell the truth. You go back and look at all the people who've been lying, and we finally get down to a 29-year-old guy. Not that they convicted him of doing anything wrong in the meeting with the Russians, but he gave the FBI the wrong date. Now, wow. I think this thing is going to grow into a bigger and bigger and bigger scandal, and at the center of it is a corrupt Justice Department whose professional staff was totally in the tank for Hillary Clinton and has been grotesquely abusing its power.
You know, here's the thing that I can't get. Can you think of any reason on God's green earth that Barack Obama, Hillary, putting aside all the evidence that we now know they had, that Vladimir Putin had agents in America bribing, extorting, money laundering, racketeering, they knew in 2009. Holder knew it, Mueller had to know it, Rosenstein knew it, the two guys in particular in this case. Why would Hillary or Obama, just on the surface of it, why would you ever give a hostile regime and a bad actor, Vladimir Putin in Russia, 20% of our uranium? And that's what he set out for? And we knew he set out and he was committing crimes to get there. How is that possible?
Well, I mean, first of all, if the numbers are right, and I think this is another thing Congress should insist on bringing in the information and compelling it to be delivered. If the numbers are right, there were various sources associated with this who gave $145 million to the Clinton Foundation through a Canadian foundation which could avoid the agreement they'd made with Obama about reporting their donations in the United States. Now, as bad as the Bill Clinton $500,000 speech was for a Russian bank, this is 290 times as much money. So you have to say to yourself, oh gosh, why would Bill and Hillary go through with a deal that might involve $145 million? Well, I'm going to be old-fashioned here, Sean. I know it's a shock. Follow the money. They wanted the money. This is about corruption. Hillary, from the time she made money illegally on cattle futures for her entire career, has thought she could get away with this stuff. It's only as it begins to unravel now that we begin to realize that this is truly horrifying. You have two attorneys general of the United States. You have the director of the FBI, Mr. Mueller. You have a local attorney who becomes the deputy, who then the attorney general, who then brings in Mueller. You have a level of corruption that's unimaginable. And let me say, quoting Alan Guelzo at Gettysburg College, who's a student of this, he believes this is the most corrupt presidency in American history. We've only touched the beginning of it,
about the Obama
and it's going to keep unfolding.
But you never got to my fundamental
question. The Obama
question.
administration is the most corrupt.
But is there any reason you can think of that you'd ever give 20% of the foundational material, American assets, to Putin and Russia? What did America get? What did Obama get?
They didn't care. They didn't. Well, the Clintons got $145 million. They didn't care. Remember, Obama is the president who said to the then Russian President Medvedev, and was caught on camera, let us get through the election, and then we can be a lot more generous to you. Right. I mean, why would you think that these guys who are Looney Tune liberals, who have no idea of the real world, would have worried about giving Putin uranium? They were out of touch with reality. They're still out of touch with reality.
I got to ask you about Trump.
That's just a fact.
I got to ask you about the Fusion GPS story. I got to ask you about how corrupt the media is, and also, you won't believe what Hillary Clinton said about our coverage about this show of her scandals. Newt weighs in on that straight ahead.
I would have much preferred to have come to the dinner tonight from a slightly closer residence. But it does strike me that in the last few days, at least Fox News seems to think that's where I live in the White House. Because they spend a disproportionate amount of their time talking about impeaching me. So, look, if they want to make a trade, I'd be more than willing.
No, we're just pointing out potential crimes and corruption that you have had, and we believe in equal justice under the law. And what you did was inexplicable, Hillary. That was her over the weekend, once again attacking Fox News and obviously us, because we dare to tell the truth about the scandal surrounding her. We want equal justice under the law. We continue more. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. All right, the very thing they have been accusing President Trump and his campaign of, no evidence after a year, we now know they're guilty of. We now know that Clinton's campaign, the DNC, and now we learned over the weekend Barack Obama, about $10 million, over $10 million of money spent to a law firm, they all use the same law firm, to funnel money to this Christopher Steele that gets phony information from Russia, this salacious dossier using Russian sources to influence Americans in the last election. When is Mueller going to investigate that? Because we know the money exchanged hands. We know it was propaganda and misinformation.
Well, look, I think this is the real test of Mueller. Early on, I said I thought he had a record for being honorable. I frankly withdrew that after looking at who he was hiring, how he was operating, what he was doing. It's going to be fascinating to see this. My newsletter tomorrow at Gingrich Productions.
I've been telling people, when you surround yourself with only Obama, Clinton donors, no Trump donors, and you look at the Manafort thing, and it's so far removed from his original mission, which was to look at Trump-Russia collusion, I've been telling people he wants to use Manafort, squeeze him in the hopes he wants to take down Trump. Tell me I'm crazy.
Sure. No, I don't. I don't disagree with you. My point is, now we have a chance for Mueller to prove he really is nonpartisan. He really is above all that.
Don't believe it.
And it's easy. First he goes. I didn't say I believed it either. I said he has a chance to prove it.
Yes, sir.
He goes after Tony Podesta. Then he goes after Tony's brother John. Then he goes down the list of the Clinton people. I mean, if he's prepared to be genuinely open and to really go after the Clinton case. And here's what I found, as I was thinking about this during the commercial break, the most sobering thing about this entire unbelievable scandal is if she had won, none of this would be coming out. I mean, think about it. They would have covered it up. They would have continued to corrupt the FBI. They would have continued to corrupt the Justice Department. We would have learned nothing about how horrible this is, and they would have continued, I think, to sell out America's interests. It is an astonishing gap. And people who wonder about whether or not it was important that President Trump won, you think about the difference between what we're learning now and what would have been covered up by Hillary Clinton.
Bribery, extortion, money laundering, racketeering, and Mueller and Eric Holder and the FBI informant with evidence. In 2009, they didn't stop the Uranium One deal, and they knew Putin was at the bottom of it. Let me ask you this. Talk about the fairness of a grand jury process. You're going to indict a ham sandwich. This is in an area where Hillary Clinton, D.C., a good friend of mine pointed out, Ken Starr couldn't get an indictment against the Clintons or a conviction there ever. And yet this is the area that is now being used in this campaign. It seems like there's an injustice when it's so overwhelmingly left-wing liberal Democrat.
Oh, sure. Look, this goes all the way back to John Connolly in 1979 being indicted by a grand jury that was 100% Democrats and eventually winning the jury trial. But it's very uphill and very difficult. And I think a good prosecutor, remember that all the grand jury is saying is that there is reasonable grounds to look at this. The test for an actual trial is the opposite. The test for the actual trial is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Huge difference.
So I don't think you should automatically respond just to that. But the point I was trying to make a minute ago, I want to come back to, because this is a direct challenge to Robert Mueller. If he is sincerely interested in justice, he has to go after the $145 million in Canada. He has to go after Bill Clinton's $500,000. He's got to go after all the different permutations that we've now learned about, including the stuff that when he was FBI director was covered up. Now, I'm with you in that I have a hunch he'll fail this test. But I think it's a fascinating moment in American history, particularly when you had Tony Podesta resign, because he now knows he's so guilty, he doesn't want to take his entire firm down with him.
And you forgot Trump. I have another challenge. Look at the funding of Clinton and now Obama and the DNC for phony Russian propaganda that was repeated by everybody to influence an American election. We know they did that. That's a fact at this point.
Right. It turns out that Trump's the definition of fake news, I'm not sure how you say it in Russian, but you now have absolute proof there was fake news, cheerfully carried up by several of the networks in the New York Times. And it was false. In fact, I'd be fascinated to see if any major elite news media goes back and looks at how much they were duped.
Hillary, DNC, Obama bought and paid for Russian propaganda to influence an election. We can follow the money. Mr. Speaker, you've been great. Thank you. What? Go ahead, last word. I see something good coming. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, couldn't you imagine the New York Times or the Washington Post reporting, here are the ways we were duped? Would that be like a Pulitzer Prize winning moment?
Yeah, but hell will freeze over, and we were right and they were wrong, and they'll never admit it. Good to see you, sir. Thank you. Up next, we have a lot more to come. Sebastian Gorka, Greg Jarrett, why a special counsel should now investigate Fusion GPS, and of course, Uranium One, and much more. We're on top of it as Hannity continues.
The big difference here is you have a meeting that took place versus millions of dollars being sent to create fake information to actually influence the election. You compare those two, those are apples and oranges. What the Clinton campaign did, what the DNC did, was actually exchange money. They took a meeting. Those are far different. And one is pretty common practice in any campaign to take a meeting. The other one is actually paying money for false information. That's a big deal and a big difference.
Finally, somebody saying what we've been saying. That's the White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders, earlier today explaining why the millions of dollars spent by the Clinton campaign on the DNC, fake Russian Trump news, salacious dossier, they paid for it, bought and paid for by Hillary and by the DNC. And now we find out Obama. Joining us now, former deputy assistant to the president, Sebastian Gorka, Fox News legal analyst. We'll get to his column, which is blockbuster, in a minute. Greg Jarrett. All right, Sebastian Gorka. Sarah's right. There is real Russia collusion, Hillary, DNC, Obama bought and paid for, spread throughout the country to influence the election. All lies.
Yeah. So let's just look at what happened. James Comey, who admitted leaking federal documents written on federal hardware, admitted to doing so to trigger the creation of the special counsel, who is Bob Mueller, who is his buddy. And what was the mission of the special counsel? To investigate Russian undermining of our presidential election in relation to the Trump campaign. And what do we find out this morning? Paul Manafort is charged with not disclosing his foreign bank accounts.
From 2006 to 14.
Right. 11 years ago. Okay, that's how far they have to dig. And not registering adequately as a representative of foreign government. In the past, when other people have been found to not have registered in time, do you know what they get, Sean? They get a slap on the wrist and are allowed to retroactively register themselves.
Let's see what happens to Tony Podesta if he did the same thing.
Right.
Let's see. Your column was amazing. Still no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. Hillary, a different matter.
Yeah.
It's all reversed. It's the boomerang I predicted and now is coming.
It was amusing and predictable that the media was giddy with delight all weekend long when they learned that there would be an indictment revealed on Monday. It was like a 2-day-long tailgate party for the media. And then Monday comes, and
That's a great way to describe it.
All of a sudden, they read the indictment and go, oh, tax fraud by Manafort and Gates has nothing to do with Trump and Russia and so-called collusion. Papadopoulos pleads
they're
guilty.
making a big deal about the 29-year-old. Who is he? I never heard of him.
This is a guy who was a volunteer who served on a council that met once. That's
it? And he recommended, I can get a meeting with Putin.
Right.
Who is this kid?
They didn't charge him with an underlying crime of collusion because no such crime exists, only in antitrust law. It is not a crime to talk to a Russian. My goodness, presidential candidates for decades have been making overseas trips before the election to burnish their foreign policy credentials. And they talk to foreign nationals, including Russians. It's not a crime.
And the Fusion GPS, Clinton, DNC, Obama funded through the same law firm.
Right.
Was broken here?
Could be.
Is that propaganda?
It depends, in terms of the Obama campaigns, depends on what the money was spent for. In terms of Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC, absolutely, in my judgment, there are two federal campaign election laws that make it specifically a crime to give money to a foreign national in a campaign and to hide it by filing false and misleading reports.
This is the amazing. There's so much here. You'd be proud of me. Like you, I read all 31 pages. I did good today. Dr. Gorka, I don't know what's the bigger scandal. That the real propaganda, lies for the campaign, Russian lies, was bought and paid for by Hillary and the DNC, or that we sold out our national security for God knows what reason. Why would anyone give Russia and Putin, knowing in 2009 about bribery, extortion, money laundering, racketeering by his spies within our country? They had the evidence. They had emails. They had an FBI informant. They had documents. They had tape recordings. Right, and nobody stopped them. And he won. He got the 20% of America's uranium.
Right. So, look, about 3 months ago, I was in the Oval Office, and the president told me, just the two of us, they will never find anything because there is nothing to find. That's why they have to go after Manafort on wire fraud, okay? So, but what do we know? We know that this whole thing occurred, this Russia conspiracy to buy our uranium, that there was a racketeering, and who were the directors of the FBI when the investigation began? Mueller. Who was the director when it ended? Comey. And what happened? Nothing.
Rosenstein was the Maryland head of the whole thing.
U.S. attorney.
The deal went through. And I just want to ask one question. Why would we ever sell 20% of our uranium to Russia? Why? And then we're ignoring everything else. Destruction of evidence. The laptops with the FBI's permission were destroyed. The BlackBerries. That's obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence. The bleach
That's obstruction. 33,000 subpoenaed emails. Real quickly, we have less than a minute. 93% area, you're forming a grand jury, probable cause, not beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
You can't indict a ham sandwich.
Look, as a lawyer, I always thought grand juries were a joke. The defense is not allowed to be there. It's not adversarial. The judge is not there. It's a low standard. And basically, grand juries just mimic what the prosecutor tells them to do.
You have any gut instinct as to if they have a good case against Manafort? It has nothing to do with Trump, Russia?
It has the fingerprints of Andrew Weissman all over it. Wow. He is engaged in abusive prosecutorial tactics historically.
We will talk about this later in the week. Thank you, Dr. Gorka. Thank you, Greg Jarrett. When we come back, wow. Let There Be Light beat George Clooney and Matt Damon. We'll tell you how. All right, I want to thank all of you. Let There Be Light. I'm the executive producer. A massive box office success. Remember, we're an independent film. $1.9 million over the opening weekend. The best reviews we've ever seen. Number 2 in per-screen average all nationwide. Now, get this. We were only, because we're independent, in 373 locations. I'll give you an example. George Clooney, Matt Damon's movie Suburbicon was in 2,046 theaters. We're in 373. Their movie made only $900,000 more than our film. We had only 14% of locations compared to the other top 10 movies. We have almost a 90% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. You made this possible. And the good news is, because you went out to see it, now we're going to get so many more theaters. And I just want to thank you. you. One of the best openings of a Christian film ever. You made it happen. We'll have more theaters, Hannity.com for more information. And it has a message that will impact your heart, your mind. So many people cried. So many people sent me the best stories and testimonials. Thank you so much for supporting it. And I'm glad so many of you liked it. All right. That's all the time we have left this evening. The debut, Laura Ingraham Live, the Ingraham Angle, and I'm so proud of you and happy for you. Wish you all the success.
Thanks so much, Sean. Really appreciate it.